I think people should be aware that digital, which has fantastic benefits for us, that we, whether we have a smartphone or an iPad, the reality is that there are huge social implications coming about digital that are disruptive, and we should think about them carefully. Whether it's inclusive growth, not everyone is benefiting from the digital revolution, so we should be careful about that. And the way our society is organized, business models, they're changing, the sharing economy. We haven't really thought through what the implications are for really business organizations and companies that have been with us for more than a century. They will change. So we need to think about that. Well, there are several examples of disruption that we can now see. The implications of the sharing economy, such as Uber and autonomous vehicles, will really reorganize what has been the automotive industry and the transportation industry. So if you're a truck driver and autonomous vehicles are coming, what do you do? Because your job's being eliminated by a machine. If you're an automotive company and no one owns cars anymore because they're simply renting them on an as-needed basis, then what happens to capital allocation? So those are pretty profound things, and that's just one sector of our economy. Well, the implications of digital are somewhat dark for society because what we considered to be the business model of society, if you will, was employing people that would then generate demand for a consumer open market. And that really has been the premise upon which we've organized our economies and societies. Well, the difficulty we have now is that with digitization, we perhaps are eliminating humans in jobs faster than we're creating new jobs for the humans. That gap could spell tremendous societal upheaval. So unfortunately, it is a dark topic, and it's difficult to sugarcoat that because we have to prepare for large elements of our society not having gainful or inclusive growth, inclusive employment. And so we really have to look very hard at what the implications of all this digitization and the replacement of humans with machines. It's going to happen. It's very difficult to stand in the way of progress because if one nation state enacts a law that says machines are not allowed, well, the reality is the next nation state will be more productive, more innovative, more successful. So we have a bit of a problem here that is a dark problem, and we do need to talk about it. So I'm sorry that I can't find a sugarcoating for it because it's an issue, and we do not have a viable answer in society to this yet. So the challenge for leading in a digital world has many dimensions to it. We can think of the generational gap between the existing generation, which is leading, which really grew up in a different era prior to smartphones and the widely accepted internet. They have to lead a group which are coming into the workforce that are being decelerated. We actually take students which are used to a variety of social media tools and different tools for enhancing their knowledge, and as soon as they walk inside the firewall of a business or an organization, we say, sorry, you can't use that anymore. For good reason, because we do not have security, we do not have permissions, etc. There are a lot of good reasons for it, but we should, as leaders, recognize that we're actually decelerating those digital natives. And we shouldn't be surprised if they leave our organizations within 2 years because they really, quite frankly, are disappointed. So we have to think about that. The second area that we have to think about is the way we organize information sharing and decision making in our companies and in government. Because we have a hierarchical system, because in that era, information had to be passed up. Now when you have information that's widely available, we can push decision making down right to the so-called coalface or the customer interface. But how do we organize that in such a way that we protect the brand of the organization? We have to rethink this. The The role of public policy in digital has to change. By and large, our public policy we set rules for society, for organizations, how they compete with each other, how they do customer service delivery, and so forth. The problem that we have, rules do not work well if technology is so rapidly changing. Uber is a very good example. We organize the transportation of our citizens through buses and taxis and what have you. But in a sharing economy, all those rules change. And I think the lesson for public policy is with digital, we know that the pace of change is accelerating, because not will we have rules for Uber when all of a sudden we'll have autonomous vehicles. So here we've gone from sharing, where there's a human intervening in the driving, to where there will be a machine. And I think that public policy throughout the world will start to realize that it needs to become principles-based. Because in the debate around Uber, most city politicians had to go back to first principles to be able to deal with what is fair for the citizens and for the people delivering the service. I think we'll see more public policy built around principles that are technology invariant. Because if we make a rule for a platform for, say, Facebook, if kids are all using WeChat, it doesn't work very well. So we really need to be platform invariant, so it needs to be based on principles. I think one of the biggest implications for business education is that the brains of our students are fundamentally different from the previous generation. It's quite a profound change. We could estimate that certainly over thousands of years, the human brain has been more or less the same. So as we build up an educational approach to training, developing skills, critical thinking, generally, what worked in one generation works in another. Except this generation. This generation does not have the memory function of the previous generation. In fact, the previous 10 generations. They have a diminished memory function, but they have enhanced cerebral ability. Their corpus callosum is larger than any of the previous generations. Yet, much of our teaching and much of our business education is oriented to a generation of brains that no longer exists. And so we really need to rethink how we approach education. So-called rote memory, where we develop and rely on human memory, does not work for the millennial generation, because they rely for their memory on the machines, their smartphones, the internet, Wi-Fi. And we need to rethink what we consider to be the development of knowledge and critical thinking. The subject of silos or guilds in Canadian society, I've spent most of my life traveling the world, and in Canada, we have a uniquely siloed society. The academics tend to stay in their academic silo, the business people tend to stay in their business silo, and the public, the public service politicians stay in their silo. And of course, what happens is innovation occurs at the boundary between silos. And if we do not have citizens crossing over between silos, it's going to harm our ability to make these changes that digital is demanding of our society, because we are in guilds or silos. And the first reaction of a silo or of a guild is to protect itself. And if you have individuals, citizens, human beings that are comfortable in more than one guild, they are the leaders of tomorrow. And we need to have more crossover between the silos within Canadian society. Other societies encourage crossover, whether it's in Europe or certainly within the OECD, there's a lot of crossover. And we need to regain those crossovers. We have become far too siloed in Canadian society. At the moment, I'm seized by innovation culture in Canada. I'm the co-chair of the Business Higher Education Roundtable, which is a partnership between the Business Council of Canada, so the largest companies in Canada, the largest universities in Canada, the U15, and the largest colleges and polytechnics in Canada. So all three organizations have come together to try and look at the impact of digital, the impact of a modern economy, and how do we train students for the future in this innovative society. And the other aspect that I've been working on has been with the Governor General. So our Governor General, David Johnston, has taken on innovation as his legacy project. So the Governor General Innovation Awards, and as part of that creation of that awards program, the Governor General and I have authored a book on the history of innovation in Canada called Ingenious, and that will be coming out at the beginning of 2017. And so that is an area that has really seized my attention, because in Canada, we really need to foster and encourage an innovation culture. We already have great innovators. We need more for the future society.